Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 7 of Hive Knits and Natters podcast. I'm Lizzie, the maker behind Hive Knits over on Instagram, and you can also find me on Ravelry by searching for Hive Knits. If you're a new viewer, hello, thank you so much for coming over and joining me. I've had a few new subscribers recently since my last video, so welcome. Thanks so much for watching this video and for subscribing. It's really nice to have you on my little knitting natter team. And welcome back to any returning viewers. Hello again. Thank you so much for sticking with me and coming back to watch the 7th episode of my knitting podcast. It's a really grey November day today, so it's the perfect day for filming a knitting podcast, although I cannot believe it's actually November already. What's going on? If you're new here and you don't know anything about me, then hello, I'm Lizzie. I am a knitter, obviously, and I live in Manchester in the UK. When I'm not knitting, my day job is being a doctor. At the moment I'm working in paediatrics, but when I'm not being a doctor, I love to knit and love to sit and talk about knitting, apparently. So that's a bit about me, if you didn't already know. I'm in a super knitty, chatty mood this afternoon, and I think it's following on from a knit Zoom group we did last night. It's just so lovely. It's the second time we've done this Zoom knit and natter with a few of my knitting Instagram friends, and we just had such a lovely time. The first time we did it was 2 weeks ago, and you know, you never quite know how these things are going to go, and then suddenly 4 hours had gone by and we were still chatting, and then last night was basically the same, except it was 5 hours instead of 4 hours. So there's just nothing quite like sitting down, even over Zoom, with a group of friends and just talking about a passion that you share. It's just incredible. It blew my mind the first time and it blew my mind the second time. So thank you, you know who you are in the knitting Zoom group. And yeah, I feel like the mood from that has just carried over into today. I'm home alone today, my boyfriend Pete is at work, and I'm just in a very knitty chatty mood. So I thought, right, let's get a podcast filmed. So here we are. Before I talk about what I'm wearing, I'm just going to do a podcast recommendation, because I always forget, and I don't know why, because I love recommending podcasts and I love watching podcasts and I love watching other people's recommended podcasts, but I always just forget, and I even forgot to write it into my notes. It's like stuck in the side with a few asterisks, which is why I almost forgot to say it. So the podcast I'm going to recommend this episode is one I've been watching for quite a while, but I realised that I'd never spoken about it before, and it is the Well Love Knits podcast. Now the maker behind Well Love Knits is called Bethany, and she's just so much fun to watch. She makes stuff that's a bit more chunky than I normally make, but she is a fantastic maker and a really amazing designer, and every time I watch an episode of hers, she always has like a basket full of new ideas. Her creativity is amazing, and she edits her videos so well as well. I find them really inspiring, and the tone of them is just really cheerful, and yeah, I really enjoy them. So that is my podcast recommendation for you all today. Enjoy. So now we can talk about what I'm wearing. I'm going to put this down before I spill it everywhere. This mug, by the way, was given to me by my friend Verity. Thanks, Verity, for Christmas or my birthday last year, and I think she finds it really funny how I use it in every single podcast, but it's just so pretty and very aesthetically pleasing. So here it is again, featuring in today's podcast. Right, told you I was in a chatty mood. Oh dear. So I am wearing my finally finished with 2 sleeves instead of 1, fisherman's rib sweater, which is now got its proper name of the first sweater. I think you can probably see it from there. I'm not going to stand up. I'll do a little cutaway, because last time I stood up and tried to show you something, I ended up doing like a weird squat and it was all a bit odd. So I'm just going to sit here calmly and show you. But yeah, I'm so pleased. I finished this yesterday, just the final cuff. Finished the sleeve and then knit the cuff yesterday and then bound off, and it was just a big moment because it's almost a year to the day that I ordered the yarn for this sweater, attempt 1, and yeah, it's crazy that a year later here I am sat wearing it, and it's finished and it's blocked, it's reblocked, and it's actually being test knit at the moment by an incredible group of people all over the world. So yeah, I'm really chuffed that it's finished. I am actually going to include a Q&A in this episode, which I've tried to include twice already, and I'll get to that in a bit. So I will talk more about this then, because I did a bit of a newbie designer Q&A over on Instagram, and people asked some really interesting questions, and so I thought I could answer them a bit later. So I'll not go on and on about it now. You've seen this in various other episodes. I'm really sorry if you find this boring, but I'm really proud, and it's actually finished now, so I thought I would wear it for this episode. So that is what I'm wearing. It's the first sweater by me, made with 1 strand of Filcolana Arvetta in Marzipan and 1 strand of Drops Kid Silk Mohair in Off-White, I think the colour is. And I will insert some pictures of my incredible cohort of test knitters who are just doing such a good job making some absolutely stunning versions of this. It's really, I'm gonna not be able to do this justice, but I can't describe how amazing it is to have an idea in your head and then it becomes a thing. But then it's one thing when you make the thing and you wear the thing, but seeing other people make it, it's blowing my mind multiple times a day. So yeah, just a shout out to my really great group of test knitters. Thank you so much for all your hard work so far. There's been some absolutely beautiful versions being made so far. I love seeing all the different colours. We've got a few like autumnal rusty orange colours, a couple have done like neutrals like this one, a few darker ones like a dark grey, somebody's doing like a burgundy merlot, somebody's doing a blue, somebody's doing like a dusty green, somebody's doing like a lilac, there's a couple of pale pinks. It's amazing seeing all the different colours. So I'll try and have had some pictures just cycling through while I've been talking about that, so you can see all the different colours. If you are interested, I've asked the test knitters to use the hashtag #thefairsweater whenever they post any pictures. So if you click on that hashtag, and if you're so inclined, you can follow it, and then you can see all the progress of the test knitters as well. So yeah, that is this, and thank you so much again for all your support and championing of this newbie designers pattern over on Instagram. And yeah, it's making me smile. So talk more about this at the end in the Q&A, and if there are any other questions that you think of while you watch this, feel free to put them in the comments and I'll try and answer them. But I thought I'd do them at the end after I've done the whips and acquisitions sections. So in episode 6 I showed you one of my works in progress, which is the Zipper Sweater Man by Petite Knit, which I'm making for my brother for his Christmas present. I think I started it in October, like as in cast it on, but I had the idea and was getting all the yarn. If you want to know the saga of choosing the yarn for this project, then have a look back at episode 6, because oh my word, it was involved. But because that all took so long, and then, you know, finishing this, there's been a few things going on. Suddenly it's November, and obviously Christmas is an immovable deadline. So I'm like, right, I need to get a wriggle on with it now. But it's just here, I will show you. So the last episode, I think I'd done the amazing collar and had a few rows of the yoke done, I think, as well. So since then I have finished the yoke, and I have split for the sleeves. Let me just get it into a state where I can hold it up and show you. It's quite hard to hold this actually. That should be reasonable. So it's got this beautiful thick folded collar, and then now I've finished the yoke, you can see obviously where the zip is going to go, and it's hard to see because I've got it on, I needed my 5mm needles for something else, so it's currently on hold, but you can see I have split for sleeves and made a little bit of a start on the body. So I need to crack back on with this, because really it's just mindless stockinette for a bit now. The shaping and the tricky bits are finished until sewing the zip. But we're not going to think about that now. It's all good. Maybe I should. I'm quite a procrastinator, and I often just put off what I don't want to do or what's difficult. And I'm wondering maybe I should just try and sew the zip in. So then it's done, so I'm not trying to do the really hard bit last minute. What do you think? Anyone who's made this before, did you save the zip right till the end, or did you sew it in at the beginning and then it was done? And then also it will kind of look more like a zipper sweater, won't it, when it's got the zip in? What do you think I should do? It is looking good though. I absolutely love, now I've finally chosen the yarn, I absolutely love the combination and the colour in particular. So this is a bit of a scrappy bit, but this is Sandner's Fritted Scarn in colour code 7272, I'm pretty sure. It's like a beautiful, like foresty green colour. And then I'm holding it with a strand of Drops brushed alpaca silk, and this is forest green, I think it's shade number 11. And I purchased these both from my very good friend Simona, who runs knit.co.uk, and she was outstandingly helpful in my ongoing saga to find the right yarn combination for this project. But yeah, I'm quite jealous of the colour. I said this before, such a nice colour, it's really me. And a bit of me is like, I don't want to gift this anymore. I'll give my brother something else. But that wouldn't be very nice. So I don't think there's anything else to say really about this. We were talking last night in Knit Group about, like, sometimes in podcasts, like, you can feel the pressure to, like, always have new stuff, because when you show stuff that you've already presented, is that the right word? Discussed, no, well, whatever. You're a bit like, and now I've done 4 more rounds of stockinette than the last time. So I'll not go on about this. Although, how cute is this little carrot stitch marker? Oops, it's gone the wrong way. It's very cute. I found it in my box of stitch markers, and I think Junga from Barna Knitting actually sent this to me in the post. I remember I did a 3K giveaway and she won it. And bless her, she was so sweet. She sent me some stitch markers to say like thank you for selecting her as the winner, which was like the sweetest thing in the whole entire world. So Junket, if you're watching, thank you again. They're really adorable. There was this one and like just a couple of other cutesy ones, and I don't use progress keepers that much, but because this is going to be a heck of a lot of stockinette, I thought, do you know what, I'm going to use a progress keeper, and it's quite good actually. I need to move it because that is very out of date progress, but I thought I would give it a go. I fell out with this the other day, is the only other thing I'll say on it, because I'd almost finished the yoke and I must have got to about, well, just before the end of the raglan. I think there's 19 increase rounds, so I think I'd got to like 17 or 18, and I thought I'll do a quick stitch count just to make sure I'm right, and I was not right. I was nowhere near right. I was very, very wrong. Something very strange had happened. I'll see if I can put a picture in, but basically, obviously you've got your raglan coming down like that, and mine had gone, and then like, I think I must have slipped the wrong stitch marker or something had happened, but I ended up having like a step in my raglan. And at first I was like, oh, can I get away with it? But then it wasn't one of the back ones, it was one of the front ones. And also this is a gift. If it had been for me, I might have been like, ugh. But anyway, my inner perfectionist and the fact that this is actually a gift from my brother told me to undo it. And I'm glad I did. I never ever have regretted frogging anything ever. It's always the right thing to do, but at the time it's always like, why? Or at least that's what I think. It's always the right thing to do. Always, always, always. So yeah, zipper sweater, not too much progress, probably because I had progress, then had to go all the way back. Oh, 20 rows, by the way. I had to rip, the mistake was 20 rows back. And yes, at that point it was rows, because I hadn't joined in the round yet, because the construction is for the short rows, and then until you reach the point of the here, meeting in the round, under where the zipper is sewn in, it's backwards and forwards in rows, not rounds. So that was a lot of purl rounds that had to be undone. So it nearly went in the naughty corner, but I was like, I don't have time. I don't have time to send this to the naughty corner. So I just cracked on and did it, and paid more attention the next time. I actually used the next time, but when I redid it, I used a technique that Caroline from Caroline's Knits taught me, which is to, like, obviously you've got your raglan stitch markers either side of your raglan, but then have another stitch marker that is the other side of your increase stitches, if that makes sense. So the more rounds you do, the more stitches are in between your raglan marker and your second marker, so you can see how many you've increased, so you can keep an eye on it, and they should obviously all be the same. She's a smart cookie, that one. Reet, so that's whip 1. Whip 2 is a secret test knit. Dun, dun, dun. I should imagine I'll be able to talk about it on the next episode, so it won't be a secret for too long, but it is a secret and I'm not allowed to talk about it, so zip. But I can tell you what I'm using to make it. Don't see why not. I'm sure whoever's secret test knit it is will watch this and tell me off if I'm not. So I've actually done all the knitting for it. I just need to do some sewing for it. You can tell I like this person who it's a secret test knit for, because I don't like sewing very much. So, although it's not very much sewing, but I didn't mind doing it for this person. So, stop rambling. I am using this bad boy, upside down. This bad boy which is the Sandnes Double Sunday, the collaboration between Sandnes Garn and Petite Knit, to make this absolutely fabulous colour, which is just a bit of me. I think if I was I think I've said this before, if I was a colour, I think I'd be halfway between this and the colour of the Sandnes Cos that Simona from Knit Yarns very kindly gifted me in like a beautiful like dusky pistachio colour, like somewhere in between here. This is me. But yeah, I'm using this, which is 100% merino wool. I actually bought this from Simona quite a few months ago, along with the whipped cream colourway, because I still have, and I'll talk about it in a bit, a plan to try and design some kind of contrast raglan. Here's my swatch. And yeah, I kind of got overexcited and ordered a load of yarn to make a sweater that would have a contrast raglan, which I still really want to do. So this is the whipped cream, and this is the statement green, which is this one. Statement green, whipped cream. What they look like together. And I think in hindsight, I probably bought too much statement green, because this is duplicate stitch and you don't need very much at all. So then when I started this secret test knit and this was one of the recommended yarns, I was like, oh, I can use my statement green, because I think I have too much of this for what I would need it for the future contrast raglan sweater. This will be interesting when future me is trying to make said contrast raglan sweater, and I come on here to film a podcast and say, ran out of statement green because I used some of it for a secret test knit and now I don't have enough. So we'll all be laughing then, won't we? But no, I think it'll be fine. This was my swatch. It doesn't give anything away, showing you the swatch. So it's swatched up really nicely. It's lovely. This was on 5mm needles, 1 strand of Sandnes Double Sunday. I also swatched with 2 strands of Filcolana Arvetta. This is the juicy green colourway, which I have in my stash alongside the matching Tilia, and I can't decide what to use it for. I bought it, no I didn't, I won it from Simona last Christmas or 2 Christmases ago, or no, last Christmas. And yeah, I won one of her giveaways, and the prize was some Arvetta and some Tilia, and I chose it in this beautiful juicy green colourway. Again, a bit of me. I should have got the Tilia out actually, it's in the drawer. And originally I was going to hold it double to make a sweater number 9 by My Favourite Things Knitwear, and then I ended up making other things, and now I don't know if I still want to make that. But anyway, I've got sweater quantities of this and the matching Tilia mohair in the drawer. So what do you think? What do you think I should make? What are your pattern recommendations for essentially, well, I suppose this is fingering, isn't it? Single strand or DK double strand and some mohair in the matching colour. Other options are like the balloon sweater by Petite Knit. I think that's really elegant, and that uses Arvetta and Tilia, so that's an option. Yeah, let me know what you think. Anyway, I've digressed massively. It's because it's secret. I'm trying so hard not to actually say what it is. But yeah, this is my swatch. It's currently drying. I hope I'll be able to show you in the next episode what it is. Any guesses? Anyone have any guesses? If you're right, I will... Oops. I don't know. You'll have my respect and appreciation. I don't think I can give you anything else, but that's worth quite a lot. Yeah, what do you think the secret test knit is that I'm making with this little beauty? So that's both my whips at the minute, actually, seeing as this is finished. And yeah, I've been kind of blasting through my projects a bit. I finished my Aosta sweater, which I was wearing in the last podcast. I finished this. I've almost finished that secret test knit. I just need to crack on with the zipper sweater man now, and maybe cast on something new, maybe. Acquisitions. I don't actually have any yarning acquisitions because, as I was just saying, I've been trying quite hard to bash through my whips and then use yarn that I've got in my stash. So for example, for the secret test knit, I was like really pleased to be able to be like, actually no, I've got 2 possible yarns I could use for that. I didn't have to buy anything, which made the whole process so much quicker because I could just swap straight away, which was great. However, I have a non-yarny acquisition, which I'm still quite speechless about it. This was sent to me by somebody, and I'll explain properly in a minute. But yeah, this was sent in the post as a gift, like a complete surprise, and it's just incredible. This was made for me by a creator on Instagram in the ceramicists world, called HK Clay, and I'll put a link to her profile and her Etsy page in the description, and then also a screenshot of her Instagram next to me here. And when I was at medical school, Harriet, who is the maker behind HK Clay, she was at medical school with me, and we were at the same like base hospital, so we knew each other. We never knew each other that well, but kind of since we've left medical school and I kind of like set up Hive Knits, and she has since set up HK Clay and got quite into like pottery on the side of medicine, and we kind of kept in contact a bit, like just, you know how you sort of, you speak a bit about, oh that's amazing, or you kind of interact over a post or a picture or something intermittently. And it's nice to catch up with someone who's kind of doing something similar, obviously doing medical training. I think she's training, she always used to want to be a neurologist, so I should imagine she's doing like core medical training, and then will specialise in neurology if that's what she still wants to do, which is very clever study, basically the study of the brain and how it works, and pathologies of the brain. So amazing stuff. And I remember seeing when she got into ceramics, and like she does like pottery, I'm probably going to get all the jargon wrong, but she does the throwing on a potter's wheel, you know, where you like pedal the wheel and it goes around and then you shape it. And some of her stuff's incredible. Check out her Etsy page, honestly, it's really nice. But we kind of like chatter every now and then completely out of the blue, she sent me a message and was like, can I have your address? And she said, oh, I've made you something. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really nice, thank you, that's so kind. And oh my word, look at this. So, as if this wasn't incredible enough, so she's made me a yarn bowl. I hope you can see that there. Isn't it stunning? It's like this gorgeous, I love that, pottery with the gorgeous purple inside, and like the really pretty spiral for your yarn and for your yarn to come through there. And it's so lovely, and it's got her little maker's stamp on the bottom. And I also thought it would be really nice as a candle holder when I'm not using it for yarn, because how nice would it be like with the light coming through there. But if that wasn't enough, look at this. It says Hive Knits on it and it's my logo. And I just think that's amazing. Harriet, thank you so much. I honestly, like, when I opened it, when I saw it was a yarn bowl, I was like, that's amazing, that's so thoughtful, thank you so much. And then I saw that and was like, just the time and effort that's gone into like recreating my logo on there and making something, I've never had something that's been so personalised. Like, this is her creation. No one else has, I mean, unless she's made a fleet of these, I don't think she has, because no more one apart from me. But yeah, I'm still a bit speechless, and I just think it's so kind. And you really didn't have to, Harriet, and just thank you so much. And if anyone's like looking for any pretty like ceramics or gifts for loved ones for Christmas, honestly, please check out her Etsy, because she makes such lovely things, and it's so nice for me to be able to like promote her on this platform. Not that I've got a huge following, but do you know what I mean? Just to be able to say thank you, and maybe if one person watching this podcast goes and looks on her Etsy page and maybe buy something or bears her in mind for future, it's so nice to just be supporting the creative outlet of someone who it gets me and does the same thing as me and understands the need to have a creative outlet away from the work that we do, especially at the moment. So how amazing is that? I hope you can see without being able to see. If it's not clear when I do the edit, I'll make sure I do a cutaway, because it's just amazing. She's even done the little bee and painted it yellow. So yeah, I'm so chuffed with that, Harriet. Thank you so much. It's really precious. It lives on my shelf normally, actually, but I had it down here for ease of reach, because I thought, knowing me, I'd probably break it or something while I was trying to reach for it. But yeah, thank you, amazing. I have no words. So, oh, it's gone a bit dark outside. Hope the lighting's still okay. So, time to do the Q&A. So, I've tried to do this Q&A 3 times, including now. So, the first time the first time was the podcast that never was, when I made my notes, got all dressed up in my finished Aosta sweater, sat down, set the camera up, and was ready to film a podcast, and then realised I had friends coming around in like 1 hour to watch the Bake Off, and I was like, why did I do that? Silly. And then the second time, I actually recorded the answers to most of the questions on the podcast, the last episode, but it was really, really long. It was like 2 hours, and I was like, I think this has got a bit. I mean, I like watching long podcasts, but I thought maybe 2 hours was a bit much. So I thought, you know what, it's fine. I'll save them and I'll do them next time, because I knew I wouldn't have as many projects to talk about and discuss. So here we are, 3rd time lucky. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in any questions. It probably feels like I just asked for questions and then completely ignored you all. I didn't. I did write them down and actually went through the process of answering them once and never publicised it. So that was an interesting use of time, but it does mean I've kind of practiced it once. For some reason, I feel like my accent's changed. Maybe not, maybe I'm just going mad. I do find that when I'm at work, I speak differently to when I'm not, and like I'm around people who have quite strong northwest accents. And for some reason, when I was talking about that pottery, then I just felt myself go into a bit of, anyway. You probably will think I'm mad. Maybe I am. I'm just in such a chatty mood, and I don't know quite where it's come from. So yes, thank you so much for asking some questions. I always get this weird like feeling when I do a Q&A box that like no one's going to ask anything, which is fine. I wouldn't mind, but people did, so that's great. So just before I like prattle on about rewind, so I asked on Instagram if anybody had any questions for me as someone who's literally just started with designing knitwear. So before I prattle on about it, I just wanted to say, as a kind of disclaimer, not that anyone's like particularly judgy, but more just for myself, I am completely new to this. This is the only thing I've ever designed. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I have learned so much in the 1 year that I've been doing this, you know, very much part-time. I'm by no means an expert, and I didn't want to do this Q&A and be like, oh, I've designed one thing, I'm now an expert, come to me for all your design questions. Like, it's not that at all. Before I did this, I had literally no idea how anything like this worked, and I'd have found it quite interesting if someone had been like, do you have any, like, you know, like almost questions that you're like, oh, is that a silly question? I think that's what I'm trying to get at. So I'm by no means an expert, and I'll probably say stuff that's wrong. People who've been designing much more designing experience than me will probably be like, oh, I'm not sure about that. And also I had a lot of help, and as I'll talk about as we go through, I've not done everything myself, and I've made quite a conscious decision not to do everything myself for specific reasons. So just wanted to say that I'm not trying to sit here being like, oh, I'm now a design guru, because I'm not at all. And I feel like an absolute newbie still. But I just thought I'd share some of my experience, and a way of structuring that rather than just me jabbering is by people asking stuff. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. It's also quite interesting because basically this is me sharing my thoughts, but my thoughts have actually changed even in the 2 weeks since I filmed the last podcast, so, or 3 weeks or whatever it is. So there you go. So question 1. Well, I had quite a few questions, which was lovely, but quite a lot of them were quite similar. They were just worded in similar but different ways. So I've kind of paraphrased and like smushed some of the questions together. So the first kind of category was how long have you been designing and how did you start? So part A, how long have I been designing? Not very long, 1 year at a push. And how did I start? So rewind a year, everything was obviously a bit more crazy than it is now with regards to COVID, and as I've talked about before, I was working in psychiatry. I massively burnt out and developed awful anxiety, didn't recognise it as soon as I perhaps should have done, hence the burnout, and needed some time off work. So I went to go and stay with my parents who live in Devon, and it was amazing because I could just completely get away from work and heal a bit. But I did find that I'd lost my purpose a bit because I wasn't going to work, and I'm used to being really, really, really busy, and I wasn't. And that was good because it made me address some things that needed addressing. But it was also difficult because I didn't really know what to do with myself. So for ages I'd wanted to start trying to design something. I think I talked to Sophie, the Knit Pearl girl, about this, and Laura Penrose Knits mentioned it in her most recent podcast as well, that knitting is amazing and following other people's patterns is amazing, but there was that bit of me that was like, ooh, I want to try and create something of my own. Or you knit a pattern and you're like, oh, that's really nice, but oh, wouldn't it be cool if there was this feature or that element, or, you know, I think for me it was quite a natural progression from knitting other people's patterns to like wanting to make my own. And just like a bit more of a challenge as well. Like following patterns is not easy, especially like advanced patterns. It's not easy by any means, and you know, even now I'm doing projects that are other people's patterns and finding techniques that I've never done before and stuff. So it wasn't like, oh, I've completed knitting. Not at all. But it's a different kind of challenge. And I'd just been thinking about it for a while, and I'd seen fisherman's rib quite a lot of places as well, and been like, ooh, that's really pretty, but I'd seen like whole garments made in it, and I don't know, I just had the idea quite a while ago of like, ooh, wouldn't it be really cool to make like a garment that's like plain stockinette but then fisherman's rib sleeve. And for some reason it was in my head, and it was like knocking about in there for a while, and suddenly I had much more time on my hands. So that's kind of how that started. So the second question I've got here is, where did you learn how to make a pattern? And the short answer is nowhere, because as far as I know, there's no resource that says this is how you make a pattern. There are, I can't name them because I've never sat down and followed any, but there are some like quite established designers who do like run courses and like workshops on like how like design basics and stuff like that. So maybe if you feel like that's how your brain would work, that would be a good way to get into it. I learned how to make a pattern from other people's patterns. I think you knit enough things and you follow enough patterns, and I think test knitting really helped with this, because when you test knit, you're like scrutinizing patterns a bit more, and you're very aware that it's like a draft and it's somebody's thought process rather than a polished finished item. But yeah, I learned from other people's, and was like, oh, this is how you write a pattern, this is the rough order of things, this is how you actually write down a knitting instruction, because it's harder than you think. I learned so much, as a side note, from like the grader and the tech editor that I used, because the first time I like wrote stuff down on my phone as I went through making this, I like wrote stuff down as I went. So thank you, past Lizzie, for doing that, because it made things a lot easier, even though as it turned out I wrote them down a bit wrong. But where was I going with this? Yeah, the way I actually wrote down like instructions was just it didn't actually fit with how the industry standard of writing instructions. And you'd think that like writing knit one, purl one, and then some kind of repeat would be easy, but it's not that easy. So yeah, I would say if you think like a course or a workshop is your thing, I think there are ones out there. I don't know of any specifically, but they do exist. But I think you get to the stage where you read that many patterns, test knitting patterns, that you just kind of think, right, I could probably have a go at like roughly doing this myself. It's suddenly gone really dark. I might pop this light on. I don't know if that's helped. I'm just gonna check that this setup is still okay. Yeah, it'll do. I suppose this is what we'll have to. I started podcasting in the summer, so I've never really had to deal with this before, but it is 20 to 4, the clocks have just gone back, and a big rain cloud is just passing overhead, so I think that's why it's gone so dark. Might have to invest in some better lighting, but for now, this lamp is on. Cozy vibes. Let's just have a little snuggly chat, shall we? Where did I get to? Okay, so I've lumped a load of things into question 3 because basically I had loads of questions about sizing. And this is where I want to like bring my disclaimer back in, because for me, sizing and in that grading was one of the biggest like barriers to actually getting this pattern written up and into the world and all that jazz, because I was really intimidated by it. I'd made this and was kind of probably ready to start writing it down and grading it way before I actually did, because I was just so like, oh no, I can't do it, it's too scary, I don't have time, like it's too intimidating. And because of that, in the end, I just was like, look, maybe I don't have time to sit down and work it all out myself with the clever spreadsheet, but if I accept that and ask someone else to do that for me, then we can get this ball rolling. So I didn't grade this. I paid a professional grader to grade this for me, and I would say 100 times over that was the right decision for me. It wasn't cheap, but then it shouldn't be cheap because it's a really difficult process, and the person I used was incredible. I mentioned her in the last podcast, but her name is Josephine Cush. She works for Tech Edit Sisters with her sister who's called Yvonne, I think, and she does like loads of crochet stuff, and then Josephine does the knitting stuff. And yeah, I'm really glad I did, because with my job and like when I wanted to get this going, I was in a patch of like nights and weekends and like loads of really unsocial hours, and I just didn't have the brain power to sit down and be like, right, I want to grade this, how do I do it? And I'm sure I probably could have done, and it probably would have been really satisfying, but I think it would have taken me a long time. I probably would have got it wrong, and it just wasn't right at the time, and that's why I chose to use a professional grader. So I'm not going to pretend that I know loads about the actual physical grading process. What I'd really like to do in future, when, you know, with future designs, which I would love to do, obviously there'll be hard work, but I think the first one will always be hardest because you've never written a pattern before, you've never written out instructions before, you don't even have a template, like there's nothing, there's no bones to hang your content on, if that makes sense. So I'm hoping that in the future I can kind of work backwards, look at all her amazing calculations for this, try and understand it, and then apply it to future knits, if that makes sense. So I'm hoping that I have made an investment for the future in getting this first design professionally graded. But it means I don't like understand completely the ins and outs of grading for all different sizes, but through her and like having discussions with her and seeing the recommendations for the pattern that she gave to me and seeing her spreadsheet that she sent me, I definitely have a better idea of it all than when I started, if that makes sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I know a bit about sizing, but I'm not going to take the credit for having graded this myself, because I didn't. If that makes sense. I can't remember if I said in my last episode or whether it was in the bit I didn't air, but I'm always in favour of like full transparency, and I'm also always in favour of paying people what they're worth for a service. So I'm more than happy to like share what I paid for the grading. She says, I'm not being quite able to remember. I'm pretty sure, well, Josephine quoted me 4 to 7 hours to grade this, and I think in the end she invoiced me for 6, and I think it was $30 an hour. So that's $180 basically, which you can convert into your own currency. Personally think it's worth every penny. fully understand that not everyone will be in the financial position to be able to just drop that on that service. But equally, like, it's a skill. She was amazing. She was so good with the communication and so quick that I don't have a problem with paying appropriately for such a service, if that makes sense. So I sit on both sides of the fence, and like I said, it was the right thing for me to do at the time. So some of the grading related questions I'll try and answer as best as my understanding, as far as I understand, if that makes sense. There's so much that I still don't understand. But one of the questions was like related to sizing. Someone said, well, a few people said, how do you work out the stitches, rows, increases and decreases that will make like a garment of a size? And I remember being like a bit like mind blown about this before I did any designing as well. And honestly, the answer is your swatch. Like, in my previous videos where I've talked about like my really early knitting journey and some of the funny things I made, and it was funny because they were too big or they were too small. Like, honestly, the common factor in all those mistakes is the lack of a swatch, or not doing your swatch properly, or not blocking your swatch. And we'll come back to this because even now, when I'm being all preachy about swatches, this bit me on the butt during the test knit. So I'm not perfect, but it just reinforced my cycle of relying so heavily on the swatch. But yeah, I guess talking really basic, how I started with this, I was like, right, which of my shop bought sweaters do I really like the fit of? And would I like to create a similar fit for this? So I found one, and I carefully took all its measurements, like bust, underarm to underarm, length, armpit to cuff, you know, all that, all the important measurements. And I was like, right, I want it to look a bit like this, with a few changes and stuff. And then I knit a swatch for this, and I experimented with a few different needle sizes until I was happy with the fabric that it created. And then you basically take your swatch, you know how many stitches on your swatch you have in 10 centimeters, and then for your using maths, you can then work out how many stitches you'll need for your, take bust measurement, for example, finished bust size, that you'll need. And you can use your 10 centimeter swatch to scale that up to the size that you want. So for example, I had a sweater that was like 51 centimeters, well, it was 51 centimeters bust, so 102, 103 bust circumference. And I was like, I like the fit of this, I want this to be that kind of size. So then I was like, right, I know how many stitches I have in 10 centimeters, so how many stitches will I need at the widest point to make the widest point 102 centimeters? And that's basically the starting point. And then you can work backwards then. You can kind of work out how big you want your neck, how wide you want your neck, and then how many stitches you're going to have to increase to get from X stitches to X stitches. That's how I did it. I think that's probably quite a basic way of doing it, because, well, is and isn't. I suppose I did plan for ease. Ease is something you need to think about as well, because obviously, going back to basics, positive ease is a garment that is bigger than your body size, normally talked about around the bust. And then negative ease is a garment that's smaller than your bust size, i.e. a garment with negative ease will stretch when you put it on, and a garment with positive ease, like this, you can see that that's where my bust ends, and that's where this ends. So this has positive ease, and I wanted that for like a bit of an oversize fit. So I guess I did work ease in actually, because I was like, I want this to be about 102 centimetres and my bust about 88 centimetres. So I kind of knew what I was aiming for there. I feel like I've gone off on a massive tangent. Does that kind of make sense? That's a starting point, and to be honest, a lot of it is also just trial and error. Constantly checking that your maths works out. It's hard work. I feel like sometimes you look, especially on like Instagram and platforms like that, and you're like, oh, well, that's a really nice sweater. Oh, so and so designed that. Oh wow, but I feel like, and why would you understand the full amount of work that goes into it when you haven't been through the process? But yeah, I mean, I've literally only designed one thing, and like I said, it's definitely not perfect, but you know, huge like respect to all the established designers out there with far more complex patterns than this one, because it's hard work and you need a lot of patience. You need that skill to have a vision and be able to like superimpose that vision and be patient and know what you're doing and trust the process that what's in your head will turn out. And yeah, it's very rewarding, but it's hard. It's hard work. So the moral of that story was, make sure you do a swatch, make sure you block your swatch and measure your swatch many times, and then when you have a swatch that you think is reliable, then you basically scale that swatch up to create your garment. So the second part of this question, people asked about grading. How does grading work? Is it difficult? How do you do it for different sizes? What did your grader do? So let's try and break it down. How does it work? Essentially, grading is the process of scaling your sample size up or down for however many sizes that you want your pattern to be knit in or able to be knit in. So this pattern goes from size 1 through to size 11 in all different increments of bust size, and the sample when I knit was a size 3, so I obviously needed to scale it down but also up quite considerably to get that range of sizes. And essentially you were extrapolating your existing design with its measurements and its stitch counts to fit smaller or larger bust sizes. But it's not that simple, as I've found out. So I think when you first think about it in simple terms, you're like, oh, I'll just keep increasing the raglan. So I'm just talking about a raglan construction, because that's all I've ever like looked at designing. But in your head you're like, oh, I'll just keep increasing the raglan and therefore it will get wider, and then that will fit people who are bigger and bigger, right? And then make it smaller and smaller for smaller sizes. But it's not as simple as that, because if you do that, yes, you'll make it wider, but you'll also succeed. Like if you extrapolate this diagonal line, you're not just going out, you're going down. So for the bigger sizes, you will end up with an armhole that's like down here. And I think what I didn't appreciate and the grader pointed out to me, and makes so much sense once you've thought about it, and I hope I'm not the only person who just didn't think about this, because now I feel really bad for not realising it, but if you had a row of people in front of you who like were larger and larger builds, their bust size would not increase at the same rate as their arm size, as their upper arm circumference. Like if you have a size 2 or a, I don't know, pattern to make a 90 centimetre bust, your 120 centimetre bust, their arm size is not going to have increased by the same amount of measurement as the bust size. Like, people aren't just triangles. And that sounds so dim and dumb to say it like that, but like, that's why you can't just increase and increase and increase a raglan. You have to employ other techniques. So I actually did know this before I went to the grader, because I had to remake this because the sleeves were too big, and I realised that you can, because when you make a raglan, right, you increase either side of the raglan, so your body is increasing and your sleeves are increasing, but you can actually do rounds where you just increase for the body and not for the sleeves. So essentially, one technique of designing for larger sizes, bearing in mind that the bust will increase and the arm won't necessarily, and people who have larger busts don't necessarily have larger arms. I basically ended up needing to use some increase rounds that were just for the body and not for the arms. And then when I sent it to the grader, when I looked through what she'd done, she kind of extrapolated on that technique. So that was really interesting, and I learned so much about, like, yeah, what I've already said, really. I that was a real, like, oh, that makes so much sense moment. So I suppose I've kind of answered a few questions. How does it work? Is it difficult? What did the grader do? The grader basically did all the extrapolation for different sizes for me, and also talked me through some principles of how to grade for different sizes. For example, as people get bigger, some people are obviously taller and not wider, but as people get bigger and wider, they don't necessarily get taller. So actually, I think half the sizes for this are one length, here to here, and then the bigger half of the sizes are all the same length, just 2 centimeters bigger. So as the sweater gets wider, it doesn't get longer as well, which sounds pretty stupid when you say it like that, but like, if you didn't know, you might just be like, oh, well, yeah, I'll just keep increasing all the measurements. No. I'll move on in a second, but when we were having knit group last night, we were chatting about this and, like, the importance of being size inclusive, and I have tried really hard with this jumper to make it size inclusive. So 11 different sizes. I also deliberately didn't label them as like extra small, medium, large, triple, blah, 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 because I don't think that labeling process is helpful. But then we were talking about it and it's like, oh, but is labeling them as numbers actually helpful either? Should you just really label them as bust sizes because that's just the truth, and not like, oh, I'm a size 9 and not a size 3, or do you know, are there still connotations between higher numbers and lower numbers? Is it any different or better to like XS, S, M, etc.? But we were talking as well about like how actually it's one thing being size inclusive, but it's actually important to also be shape inclusive, because as I've hinted, like, people with bigger busts don't necessarily have like larger arms and bigger waists, and like it's really difficult. And like, this is like, obviously there are the increases in the shaping in the yoke, the short row shaping and the raglan increases, but after that it is just straight down to make like, and I wanted like a boxy finish, it was on purpose, but I don't know, I'm wondering if maybe an option with some waist shaping would be good, or maybe that's something I could add in future. Should there be an option to like have a bigger bust but then not have such a big arm, because some people have very small frames but very big busts, and it's really difficult. But then we were also saying like, you can't design for every single person in the world, like there has to be some kind of standardization, because otherwise the possibilities are just endless and you wouldn't be able to make a design that would fit everyone. So and as well, should be a bit of responsibility on the knitter to, you know, like, if you're aware of your own body measurements and your proportions, you know, you can make changes, you can add length to the arms, you could maybe cast on less stitches for the arms, you could add some waist shaping, the possibilities are endless. And whilst you're test knitting a pattern, you probably shouldn't do that kind of thing unless obviously it's encouraged. Oh, it's raining quite heavily now. when you actually are knitting a pattern for yourself, obviously you can do all that kind of thing. It's a whole debate. I could continue. I won't. Drink is required. This is why I had to cut it out of my previous episode. Hive Knits and Natters. It's a real thing. The nattering is real. So, someone has asked if there are any good tools for designing. And so I feel like there are some apps out there and that you can use. Is it like Stitch Fiddle, one of them? And then there's like Bellish, which Bethany from Well Loved Knits talks about a little bit. But I've never used any of them. I don't quite know how they work. I believe Bellish is an app that helps you create patterns, and then there are apps and like software out there that can help you make like charts and lace designs and stuff like that. But I've never used any of that. So I'm not going to talk about that too much. But when someone said tools, I like started thinking, and I was like, actually, for me, the best tools, and this sounds really cheesy, but have honestly been like the knitting community and like everyone else's experience. And people are so generous with their experience and their advice and their gems of knowledge and tips, and it's just incredible. Like, I would say, if I'm ever stuck, like for example, when I'd nearly finished this, but I wanted to get the ball rolling before I'd finish the second sleeve, I just put out there on Instagram, I was like, has anyone ever had any experience with part blocking, or like writing up a pattern before you've finished an identical second sleeve or something? And I had so many people like, you know, get in touch and say yes they had, or no they hadn't, but they'd be interested in knowing and like giving tips and advice. And it's just amazing like what's out there, and you just ask and people just tell you, and no one's like, oh, I'm not going to tell you because this is my thing. And there's none of that. People are just so open and supportive. And so yeah, I think the community within the fibre world is an amazing tool. So don't be afraid of harnessing that. And then also for like sizes and dimensions and stuff, it's by no means perfect, and it might be a little outdated, I'm not sure, but I didn't realise that the CYC, which is like the Craft Yarn Council, or the something along those lines, don't quote me, has got like a standard, which is always a bit what's standard and who said it's standard, but you know what I mean, standardised set of measurements for women's sizes and, you know, circumferences of various body parts to help you with a rough ballpark figure of what you're aiming for with your measurements for different sizes. So that was quite helpful. Like I said, it's not to be used as gospel, and it kind of feeds into the whole thing of like, should we be labeling sizes, and who says that a size small is X centimeters, and I get all of that, but on the other side of things, it's a good place to start. So I had a quick nosy at that. So someone asked what parts of the design process have and haven't been enjoyable. And I thought this was really interesting. It took me quite a while to like formulate my thoughts on it. So I'll try and what's the word? I'll try and like succinctly explain. But let's start with the positives. Seeing something from your imagination come to life, firstly on your needles and then secondly off the needles, is honestly incredible. Yeah, it's so satisfying. There's no other feeling like it. And like I was saying, like from seeing all the stuff that the testers are doing, like it's not long ago that was all just in my head, and now someone in Sweden is making it with yarn they bought in a colour that I never even thought of, and it just blows my mind. And it just makes me so happy from like the inside, and that feeling is just like, it's immeasurable. It's amazing, and I think that must be what like makes people who do this get up and go, and I get it now, I understand. It just also makes you think like, I can do this. Like, there's so much of like, especially these days, and there's so much pressure everywhere, and it's like, oh, I can't, I'm not good enough, or like those are mantras, unhelpful thought processes that find their way into all of our minds. And it's a very human thing to do, but actually when you do something like this and then you see it come off, you actually have a moment and you're like, no, I can do this, I have done this. So for everyone out there who has also done this, you're all great. Yeah, it's amazing. Another positive and an enjoyable part of this process, like I've alluded to before, has been like the support and the interest and the promotion's not the right word, but the like encouragement and like nurturing and the, do you know what I mean? That kind of vibe from the community, the fibre community, particularly on Instagram. Like, I interact with a lot of people here on YouTube, but I haven't quite got to the same like level of interaction as I have on Instagram. And sometimes when like a complete stranger just messages me to be like, I've seen your podcast, or I've seen this picture of your design and I love it and I really want to make it, and when will it be out, and I just wanted to say like XYZ, and no one asked them to do that, no one asked them to reach out and contact me, and it always just makes me so happy, and like, yeah, it's just incredible. And I was really surprised, I didn't see that coming, so thank you to anyone who's ever done that, because it always makes my day. And I think just on a personal note, I've talked about all the mental health stuff before and how this has really like channeled me back into having a focus and lifted me out of some really dark places, and so I'm not going to talk about that again, but like obviously that's still the case. But equally, for me, this whole process has just allowed me to just use a different bit of my brain to the bit of my brain that I normally use in my day-to-day life at work. So I think when I was younger, like I was always really torn between like creative, artsy stuff and like sciencey stuff. When I was at school, all the way up to A-levels, my AS levels I did 4, French and Spanish, and art. Did I do that for AS level? Anyway, and then biology and chemistry, and obviously I've gone on to do medicine, and that kind of sciencey like bit has kind of taken over. But it's amazing now to have an outlet and like a reason to use like the other bit of my brain. Like, I don't sit in the lab all day, I don't research, it's not like hard science, but a lot of my day is spent like thinking about facts and disease processes and, you know, like chemistry and how the body works and all this stuff, mixed in with a lot of like, you know, communication skills and dealing with people and all that. But like the creative side, I never ever get to use it, and it's been so nice like finding that bit of me again, because I used to enjoy art a lot. Like yeah, like I said, I did it at school, and it's just been really nice finding that side of my brain again. And like, it's so opposite to what I do at work, and I think that's why it's so cathartic to like come home and like on my non-working days like work on something that's like a creative process. And yeah, I think it's so good for me. So all of that and more has been the bits of the process that I have found so enjoyable. I don't like want to like dwell on negatives, but I mean, the question has been asked, and it's important to be like real, and obviously it's not all perfect and lovely. And so the bits that I haven't enjoyed, if you've been following me on Instagram, you'll know that this is the first sweater Mark II, which kind of is an oxymoron, but whatever. Basically I'd started designing it, and essentially it was too big. I used what turned out to be the wrong needle size. I did it on a 4.5 to start with, and it wasn't right. The fabric was a bit too drapey. The sleeves in particular were huge. Like, I like a balloon sleeve, don't get me wrong, like that's nice, but it was too big, and it was also in fisherman's rib instead of half fisherman's rib, and it was just so stretchy and really difficult to manage. Like, this is still quite difficult to manage in terms of like finding the right length, and blocking this is a bit of a nightmare. Spoiler alert for my testers and anyone who makes this in the future, but come on, it's worth it, right? Where was I going with that? So I bit the bullet one day and was like, right, I know this isn't right, I'm not happy with it, let's just rip it back. So I ripped it, literally like weeks and weeks and weeks of work, all the way back, including the collar, till I had nothing. And then I soaked all my yarn, spent ages, because I was an idiot and I didn't wind it up when it was all noodly from frogging, but when I soaked it, I didn't wind it into hanks and secure it. I just threw it all in a thing, was like, ooh, soak the yarn, great. Obviously it was like a mess of like 5 skeins of fingering yarn, like it was awful. It took me like a day and a half to like untangle it all, and I've learned a massive lesson there, but that wasn't particularly fun. But then the end product has been incredible, so it's like a negative that's turned into a positive, because it's right now, and the fabric is right, and it wasn't right before, so that was definitely the correct thing to do. It hurt at the time, don't get me wrong, but I think the point I'm trying to make is like, if it's not right, like I said earlier with that zipper sweater, if it's not right, you can faff about all you like and be like, oh, it's okay. But if it's not and it's going to bother you, if it doesn't bother you, fine, that's completely fine. And I know people who are like, I can live with mistakes, it doesn't bother me, it's what makes it handmade, fine. But if it does bother you and it's not right, it's just knitting, just undo it. It's annoying, yes, but I don't know. Doing the job I do, I'm always just like, do you know what? No one's died, which is a bit of a savage marker of like, is it important, is it not? But you know what I mean. So yeah, that was annoying, and it wasn't a particularly enjoyable bit of the process at the time, but it was definitely worth it. Realising mistakes in the pattern I've written down here as well, and yeah. It's not surprising, right, that this was the first time I'd ever done anything like this, so it wasn't perfect. I mean, shocker, first time. Like, I feel like, I don't know if this is a me trait or like a general knitter's trait, but I feel like a lot of us are quite perfectionisty, and when it didn't go perfectly the first time, I was like really disheartened and was like, oh, failure, but that's definitely not the case. But yeah, I did come across some mistakes in the pattern. The first time that happened was when I'd written it up and sent it to the grader, and she was like, I think there are some mistakes and I don't want to go any further because they're quite significant. And I was like, oh my god. As it turned out, it wasn't mistakes as in like, obviously I'd made it by this point, so I was like, but it's fine. But it was just the way I'd written it, because you do the folded collar and then you do the German short row shaping of the neck to make the back higher and the front lower, so it doesn't ride up, and you work those short rows back and forth just for the rounds where you're doing the short rows. So essentially you're knitting flat for a bit, and the half fisherman's rib flat is different to the half fisherman's rib in the round. And also when I was writing out those instructions, I kind of wrote it out as like knit one, purl one, because in my head that made sense, but actually you need to alternate your knit one and purl one to keep, because this is, whilst it's fisherman's rib, it's still based off a knit one, purl one like algorithm. And as you increase, obviously you're getting more stitches. So in order to keep these pattern columns correct, you will need to switch your order of knit one, purl one, it might be purl one, knit one, because you've added extra stitches. So to keep, do you know what I mean? To keep in pattern, you have to alternate. And I hadn't written that, I'd just written knit one, purl one, or knit one below, purl one. When actually, when I'd worked them, if appropriate, I'd probably done purl one, knit one below. But I hadn't written that. So when she came to write out the pattern and help me grade it, she was like, this doesn't make any sense. And I remember reading that after a night shift, as I was walking out of work to my car, and I was just like looking at my phone, scrolling through my emails, and because this lady, the grader, lives in Canada, she'd obviously replied overnight. So I saw it in the morning and was like, oh my God, the whole thing's like, I was a bit sleep deprived, obviously, but like immediately just thought everything was wrong, immediately thought the whole process would have to go in the bin, immediately thought I was a failure and would never do anything like this ever again. Like, the catastrophizing that was going on was real, but it's fine. I understood eventually what she meant, and I did a little, I like worked up I basically just redid the yoke on big needles and big yarn so I could see it properly, and then wrote myself out a chart so I could like be exactly sure of what instructions I was writing and which order the knit ones and purl ones and flipped were in. So yeah, I just made myself a little like mock-up. That's like the mock-up of the fisherman's rib, so that's like a mock-up of a sleeve, and then this stockinette bit is like the body. It's actually super helpful. I would recommend this to anyone if you need to like, I'd already done all this by this point, and I was like, oh my God, like I can't like make another yoke because it'll take me forever and I don't have time. I was like, well, I don't need to make one that looks exactly like this. As long as I mirror the pattern, I can just make like a bigger one, which will be quicker, and also I can properly see what I'm doing. And actually some of my testers had questions about the yoke and the flat bit and the increases while you're in half fisherman's rib, and I use this to make a little video for them, and it's so much clearer to show on this than it is on this, so quite proud of that. And then oh God, when I just set up the test knit and everyone was so excited in the group, everyone was like bubbling away and saying what colour yarn they'd ordered, and like it was unreal, and like obviously the excitement was amazing, and everyone was just getting a bit carried away, which was absolutely fine, and like I was really excited as well, a bit giddy. And then everyone was struggling. I've basically realised that I'm like the world's tightest knitter ever, and whilst I knit this on 4mm, and obviously my gauge is my gauge because I set the gauge, a lot of the testers were struggling to get the gauge, so a lot of them have gone down to 3.5, which is fine, although I feel a bit bad for them because that is small. So I was like, oh, I'll just double check just to be sure. I mean, I measured it so many times on my swatch and on the blocked, you know, after I'd part blocked it and stuff. So I was like, sure, but I'm glad I did, because basically when I remeasured, the stitch gauge was fine, but when I remeasured the row gauge, I'd actually counted wrong. So I think originally in the pattern I'd said it was 26 rows to 10cm, but when I measured this again and my swatch, it was 30, and I was like, oh my God, that's a big boo-boo, like that's bad, because has that affected the entire measurements of my entire sweater? And yeah, I just had a massive panic about that, and had to say to the testers, like, because they'd all started swatching and stuff, and I was just like, can we just press pause for like, there's just something I need to iron out in the pattern. And you know, I was quite transparent, and I said like, look, I just need to check something with the grader, and I told them what it was, and they were all absolutely lovely. Like, only one person had properly started, and she was like, it's absolutely fine, like I'll hold off. Like, they were all fine, but yeah, it was quite stressful. But the point is, it was fine. It was, you know, we just adjusted it, and the grader was like, do you know what, you've got so much positive ease in the garment that like 4 extra rows over 10cm isn't going to make that much difference. The actual length of the garment is knit to like a recommended number of inches or centimeters anyway, so it was only really the yoke depth that I was worried about, and then there's enough positive ease in here that it's basically turned out fine. But I think the point I'm trying to make is you learn so much from these mistakes, and like next time around I will like, even though I double triple checked, I will like triple, quadruple, quintuple, whatever check my swatch, which is what I was talking about at the beginning of these questions. Your swatch is like your Bible for designing, I think, to avoid any like nasty surprises like that. But like these things happen. It's just knitting, no one's died. Had to keep reminding myself, but it is that was stressful, and I like all these thoughts were going through my head of like, oh my god, I've ruined the test knit, like people have like given up their time, people have shelled out for the yarn, X, Y and Z. Like I just suddenly felt awful and was like, oh my god, like I'm such an amateur, people have put their faith in me and I can't even count the number of rows in my swatch correctly, and you know, all this. But it's fine, and the test knit has continued and I've amended the pattern. But I think that leads into the next point of like, it's difficult like battling with this like perfectionism, and yeah, I don't know like what other people in the community feel like. Is it a crafting thing? Is perfectionism a bit of a knitter thing? I don't know if I've got it doubly bagged. It's like the knitter's perfectionism, but also like medicine like is quite, it's quite, it is and it isn't exact in as a science, but like people who do medicine are generally quite like perfectionists. Obviously stuff has to be right, there's a lot at stake, and you double triple check everything, like prescribing, like I don't know, I feel like it's quite a thing, like perfectionism is quite a thing for me, probably a bit of nature and a bit of nurture. I've written impatience here, and I'm trying to like think about why I've written that as a negative, but I think, yeah, I think there's a bit of like, probably, you know, like I love Instagram and I've talked about how amazing the community is, but there's also a side of it that's like, oh, everyone's churning out all this stuff, and like here's someone's 6th design this year, and like why haven't I finished this sooner? And there is a bit of impatience, and maybe I think once I'd got the ball rolling with like the grader and the tech editor and stuff, like I did get a bit giddy and a bit impatient, and like was like, whoa, let's get out the testers, like, and the tech editor had to be like, I think we just need a bit more time to like and I'm very glad she did, because it definitely wasn't ready at that time. But yeah, I found impatience is an emotion that has bubbled up to the surface a few times, but again, that's probably just a bit of personality, and then driven, like if I'm being honest, a bit by like the community and like comparison and stuff. And then I've also written like balancing it all with work, and that has been difficult the last few weeks. Like there's just a lot happened at once. Like I feel like this design was like bubbling away for like 10 months, and then suddenly I was like, right, I want it graded, and then it was graded, so then it was like, right, I want it tech edited, and then it was tech edited, and then it was obviously every time they did edit anything to it, it came back to me for like approval and then sent back for like re-editing and stuff. And like it just kind of it did take over my life for a good few weeks, and I was on a really awful bit of the rota of like nights and twilights and stuff, and it was a lot. But then it's done now, and now I can sit back and watch all my amazing test knitters like bring my design to life. So you win some, you lose some. I've just quickly got 2 more questions. So someone has said, do you have any more design ideas in mind? What next? So I briefly touched back on this design idea, which I'd really like to pursue. I don't quite know how like the actual sweater would look. I think I've settled on the 2 stitch contrast raglan instead of the 3. I was a bit in 2 minds, so I was like, I still am looking at this now, but like obviously this is a tiny swatch, and in real life it's going to be like, you know, here, and the fabric will be a lot bigger. So will the 3 stitch look better or the 2 stitch? I don't know. I should imagine the actual jumper will maybe be similar-ish to this, with like a double folded collar and just a pretty simple design to make the raglan stand out. But I would still really like to try and make this. We'll see. But I've also been swatching for like a mohair edition of this first sweater, so which I think would be really nice. Obviously there's a strand of mohair running with the Arwetta in this, but it's just a completely different finish, isn't it, to have it like all mohair. So I can't decide whether I want it to be a similar kind of gauge to this, like a very fine knit, which I think would look nice in like delicate 2-strand, mohair, or whether I want it to be a bit more chunky with 3 strands and be a bit more like plush. So I've done 2 swatches. This is 2 strands of mohair on 4mm needles, which is the same as I did this on. I haven't properly, I haven't measured like the stitch counts in this yet. I'm not sure if it's the same. Looks a little bit the same or slightly finer than this maybe. And then this is 3 strands of mohair on 5mm needles, which does feel like super nice, and just that 1mm difference in needle size, along with the extra strand, I suppose, has made so much difference to the material that it's created. Like, I don't know if you can appreciate that, but it's really, really different. And obviously I love this, but it did take ages on the small needle, so I'm just wondering about maybe a slightly chunkier version, and then obviously the half fisherman's rib would be bigger as well. Or should I just keep it similar to the same? I don't know, what do you think? Decisions. Let me know what you think, I'm interested. So that's a potential, like the first sweater mohair edition. I'd also be really interested to like maybe make a cardigan version, either steeked or like a different, you know, like a more of a V-neck design with the same sleeves, probably in the same yarn as the same type of yarn as this, but I could use a different colour. Basically, I'm jealous of all my test knitters knitting in like all amazing colours, and I'm like, I want an orange one, a green one, a pink one, a grey one. That's where this has come from. And then I wondered about like a junior version as well, like a children's, like, so you could matchy. That would be quite cute, wouldn't it? So those are the things that are buzzing around my head at the minute. And then someone also asked, what would you not like to design? And this is going to be a very quick answer, 1 word, and the word is socks. I've got no desire to design socks. I know lots of people who have got into sock knitting and sock designing, and I think it's amazing. I love it when people are like so passionate about their vanilla socks, so they know like what needles they use and how many stitches in their circumference and what gauge and what heel they like to use and what toe decrease, blah. Like, I fully appreciate that, but it's not for me. I made 1 pair of socks that was the Wool and the Gang kind of magic socks, and I know I definitely got put off by how fiddly it was to get gauged to get the self-patterning yarn correct. But yeah, just don't really have any desire to make socks, so that is the thing I would not like to design. So thank you for that question, it really made me chuckle. I think that's it. I feel like I've been talking for ages. I've no idea how long, maybe an hour and a half, roughly, I'm not sure. I really hope it's not too dark. I've just been sitting here as it gradually gets more gloomy, and I really hope that the quality is okay. We'll see. But I'm going to end it there because I'm simultaneously extremely thirsty and I need a wee, and I really hate it when my body does that, because I'm like, why can't you choose one? But yeah, I've had such a nice time chatting with you all today. Thank you so much for listening if you're still here. I saw a couple of people recently do a thing where they're like, if you've made it till the end, leave me your favourite emoji so I know that you're still here. I thought that was really fun, so I'm going to fully, blatantly steal that. So if you're still watching at the end of this, leave me your favourite emoji or 2 emojis. You don't have to choose one, it's okay if you've got more than one, that's fine. And yeah, thank you so much for watching and listening to me ramble. I'm so sorry if you're bored out of your minds hearing about the first sweater, but if you've stayed for the Q&A chat, like, you know, it's been a massive learning curve for like knitting, like technically a learning curve, but also just about myself as well. yeah, it's been a blast. Thank you to everyone that put forward a question, because this would have been nothing without the questions. And thank you again to Harriet for the amazing pottery that she created for me. You're a star. Let me know if you have any guesses for the secret test knit, and I will see you all next time for episode 8, which hopefully, I've got a few nights and bits and bobs coming up, but hopefully I'll be able to film in like 2-3 weeks time. Keep an eye out on the hashtag the first sweater to see what the test knitters are up to. I'd be super grateful if you would give this video a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, subscribe, and then you will get a ping from me when I have a new episode. And yeah, as always, just sharing this is always so appreciated, either by word of mouth or on social media. I've had such a lovely afternoon. I really hope you have too, and I will see you next time. Have a lovely morning, evening, weekend, wherever you are, whatever time it is with you. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.